Episode 1. The Dust-Covered Box. I never believed old houses could breathe, until the night I stepped into that forgotten place on the edge of town. The air moved as though the walls themselves were exhaling, carrying with it a century of silence and dust. Every creak of the floorboards sounded less like wood and more like a warning. I shouldn't have gone up to the attic. Curiosity was a weakness I had never shaken, and the storm outside made the entire house feel like a tomb begging to be unearthed. The smell of mildew and old wood clung to me as I pushed open the door to the attic, and that's when I saw it. A small box sat in the farthest corner, half buried beneath rotting fabric and cobwebs thick enough to look like smoke. It wasn't the box itself that caught me. It was the way the air around it felt heavier, as though time pressed down harder in that one place. I knelt, brushed the dust away, and lifted it. My fingers tingled. Not the kind of static shock you get from a doorknob, but something colder, like touching water that remembered the dead. The box was plain oak, its hinges rusted and stiff, but when I pried it open, there it was, an envelope. Its paper had yellowed, edges curled, but the wax seal remained unbroken. The crimson wax bore a symbol I didn't recognize, almost like an eye drawn shut. A letter that had not been opened in 100 years. I should have left it there. God, I should have, but I slipped it into my coat pocket instead, telling myself I'd examine it later under better light. That's when I heard it. At first, just a murmur, softer than the rain against the roof, then clearer, words too faint to understand, but undeniably words, circling me in the dark. I spun around, the attic empty, dust swirling in the beam of my flashlight. My heart thundered. Hello? No answer, just silence stretching too long, like the house was holding its breath again. I left the attic quickly, but each step down the staircase felt wrong, as though I wasn't walking out, but deeper in. The envelope in my pocket seemed to pulse with warmth, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. That night, back in my apartment, I set the box on my desk. The letter lay before me, its seal glowing faintly under the lamplight. For hours I stared, torn between opening it and burning it. And then, just before midnight, something changed. The wax seal, unbroken for a century, shifted, not cracked, not melted, shifted, as though some invisible hand pressed against it from inside. And I realized I wasn't the one choosing whether this letter would be opened. It was choosing me. Episode 2, The Seal That Shouldn't Break. The letter sat on my desk all night, and I swear it watched me. Every time I glanced away, I felt its presence pressing against the back of my skull, as if the envelope itself had eyes hidden beneath the wax. Sleep didn't come. How could it? The storm outside rattled my windows, but it wasn't thunder that kept me awake. It was the faint, rhythmic tapping from inside the letter. By morning, I convinced myself it was exhaustion, a trick of nerves. Still, I couldn't bring myself to touch it. I made coffee, tried reading, even left the apartment for hours, but when I returned, the envelope was never where I left it. Once it rested near the window, though I'd placed it squarely in the box. Another time it was half slit open on the corner of my desk, though the wax was still perfectly sealed. Something was moving it, or someone. That night, I decided to test it. I set the letter down in the middle of the desk, placed a glass bowl over it, and whispered, "Stay." Ridiculous, I know. But when I woke at 3:17 a.m., the bowl was on the floor, shattered, and the letter lay in my bed beside me. I bolted upright, my pulse ragged, every instinct screaming to throw it out, burn it, destroy it. But the seal, oh, that seal. The crimson wax shimmered faintly in the dark, an unblinking eye shut tight. And I realized, no matter what I did, it didn't want to be destroyed. It wanted to be opened. With trembling hands, I held it up to the lamplight. The edges quivered, not from the air, but as though the paper itself was breathing. My thumb brushed the wax and a jolt of ice shot through me. That was when I heard it clearly, a whisper, a single word. "Closer." I froze. My apartment was empty, silent, yet the voice had slipped directly into my ear. I pressed the letter back into the box, slammed the lid, and shoved it into the closet. But the voice followed, whispering again. "Closer." The rest of the night I sat on the couch, lamp burning, eyes on the closet door. The air in the room grew thick, heavy, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. And then came the sound that broke me. The seal cracked. Not fully, just a hairline fracture across the wax. But it was enough. The sound was small, yet it echoed through the room like bone snapping. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. Still, the fracture widened, and beneath the split, I thought I saw something glisten, something dark, like ink or blood. And for the first time I understood. The seal wasn't meant to keep me out. It was meant to keep something in. Episode 3. Ink that bleeds at midnight. They say old paper fades with time, but this letter was different. It was growing darker. For 2 nights I kept it locked inside the oak box, hidden in my closet. Still, I woke at the same hour, 3:00 a.m., to the sound of scratching. Not outside my door, not in the hall, but from within the box itself, like a pen dragged against parchment. On the 3rd night, I couldn't resist. I pulled the box onto my desk, my fingers trembling as I lifted the lid. The envelope lay inside, its wax seal fractured but still clinging stubbornly, as though fighting to hold something back. That's when I saw it. A black stain had appeared on the bottom corner. At first I thought it was rot, mold eating through the paper. But as I leaned closer, I realized it wasn't spreading randomly. It was moving upward in a thin, deliberate line, like ink. The stain quivered, then bled further across the paper, forming a crooked curve. My chest tightened. The line wasn't random, it was writing. I froze. The room felt heavier, the air pressing against my skin. The ink kept bleeding, stroke by stroke, until it resembled the edge of a letter, as though words were trying to carve their way out from inside. And then the scratching stopped. I checked the clock. Exactly midnight. The ink didn't wait for me. It bled on its own. Thick, oily streaks soaked through the parchment, dripping onto the desk like a wound that refused to close. The drops were darker than black, glistening in the lamplight with a faint red sheen. I reached out without thinking, dipping my finger against one of the droplets. It was warm, too warm. My stomach lurched. It wasn't ink. The lights flickered, and suddenly the drops formed shapes across the desk, words scrawled in frantic strokes. "Read us." I stumbled back, knocking over the chair. My heart slammed in my chest, sweat cold on my skin. The words shimmered, then melted back into the stain, vanishing as though they had never been there. But the envelope remained, the corner now soaked completely through, the faint outline of letters visible beneath the parchment. I wanted to throw it away, burn it, tear it to shreds. But as I reached for the box, I realized something. The ink wasn't bleeding out randomly. It was forming a name. Not mine, not yet, but close enough to make my blood run cold. And as the clock struck 12:01, I heard the whisper again, soft but certain, curling through the room like smoke. Closer. Episode 4. The photograph in the attic. I should have left the box closed, but the letter had a gravity I couldn't resist. Each night it drew me back to the attic, as though the house itself remembered I hadn't finished what I'd started. This time I noticed something I had overlooked before. Beneath the letter, tucked at the bottom of the oak box, lay a small photograph. I pulled it out carefully, brushing away the dust. 4 figures stared back at me. A family. A father, a mother, 2 children. Their clothes were stiff and formal, their expressions subdued, but there was something unsettling in their eyes, too sharp, too aware. I held the picture under the lamplight, and that's when I saw it. One of the children, the girl, was blurred. Not the kind of blur from age or decay, but as though she had moved while the picture had been taken. Her outline bled into the shadows behind her. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. When I looked again, her face had sharpened, but the blur had shifted to the boy. His mouth now seemed stretched wider, as if caught in a scream I hadn't noticed before. My throat tightened. I set the photograph down on the desk and stepped back. The air in the attic grew colder, heavier, pressing into my lungs. When I turned, the box rattled. The letter pulsed once, then stilled, and the photograph changed. The father's eyes, once gazing stiffly at the camera, now followed me across the room. The mother's lips had parted, faint lines of teeth visible where before there had been none. The children's faces were smeared again, shifting, restless, as though the photograph itself could not hold them. I staggered forward, snatching the picture from the desk. My fingers shook, smudging the edges. The ink from the image felt damp, fresh. And then the smell hit me. Burnt wood, charred flesh, the acrid sting of smoke that didn't belong in the room. I coughed, choking on air that wasn't mine. For a moment, the attic wasn't the attic anymore. It was fire. Heat roared against my skin. Flames licked the walls, and through the smoke, I saw them. The family. The same faces, the same clothes, only now they were burning. Their mouths open in silent screams, their skin cracking like paper in the fire. I blinked hard, and it was gone. The attic returned. The photograph lay in my trembling hands, unchanged, almost unchanged. Because now, across the bottom margin of the photo, a word had appeared, written in ash. Remember? The box rattled again. The letter inside quivered like it had been listening. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about the letter. The house itself was remembering. Episode 5, the first line revealed. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I opened my eyes, the envelope was on my chest. The box was still locked inside the closet, yet somehow the letter had found its way out, resting directly over my heart as though it wanted me to feel its weight. The crack in the wax seal had widened overnight. The faint shimmer of red was no longer wax at all. It had hardened into something else, something brittle and dry, almost like a scab peeling from a wound. And where it had broken, I could see the faintest sliver of handwriting inside. I told myself not to look. I told myself I had control. But curiosity is the cruelest kind of hunger. It gnaws at you, whispering that one taste won't kill you. So I leaned closer, bringing the torn edge up to the light, and then I saw it. Just one line, written in ink so black it looked wet even after a century. To the one who finds this, you are already cursed. My breath caught in my throat. The room seemed to tilt, the walls pressing inward. I dropped the letter onto the table and stumbled back, heart hammering. But when I looked again, the words had changed. The line was still there, but now the ink bled outward, seeping across the paper like veins spreading through flesh. The letters writhed as though alive, and though the words blurred, I could still hear them. Yes, hear them, inside my skull. You are already cursed. The lights flickered. My lamp buzzed and died, leaving only the faint glow from the street outside. Shadows shifted across the walls, not with the wind, but with intent. I grabbed the letter, ready to tear it apart. My fingers shook, my mind screamed, "End it now." But as I pulled, the paper resisted. Not like old parchment should, but like skin, stretching, refusing to rip. And from somewhere deep inside the folds, a sound rose. A whisper, a dozen whispers, no, hundreds. They weren't words this time. They were prayers. Desperate, frantic prayers, muttered in voices that were not my own. The sound filled the room, pressed into my ears until I thought my skull might crack. I shoved the letter back into the box, slammed it shut, and pressed my weight against it. But the prayers didn't stop. They spilled through the cracks of the wood, rising like smoke, louder and louder, until one voice cut through them all, clear, deliberate, and close. It spoke my name, and that was when I realized the letter didn't just know me. It had been waiting for me. Episode 6. The House Remembers. After that night, I couldn't stay in my apartment. The letter's whispers clung to the air, crawling into every silence. I packed the box back into my coat and returned to the house where I'd first found it, hoping, foolishly, that leaving it there would end this nightmare. The old house groaned as though it recognized me. Its shutters hung like broken limbs. Its roof sagged, but inside, the air was thicker than I remembered. The moment I crossed the threshold, the whispers eased, as if the walls themselves were sighing in relief. It was almost welcoming me home. I moved cautiously, flashlight beam trembling across peeling wallpaper and dust-choked furniture. Every room smelled of damp wood and something sweeter beneath it, something metallic, the kind of smell that clings to your tongue. In the dining room, I found the first clue. A newspaper pinned under shattered glass. Its headline still legible, "Family of 4 found dead in mysterious fire, 1925. My stomach tightened. The faces in the faded photo matched the family from the attic photograph. The parents stiff and proud. 2 children smiling faintly at the camera. But the ink had bled around the youngest girl's face, smearing her eyes into empty sockets. I turned away, pulse racing. That was when the house answered me. The chandelier above rattled, and from the blackened fireplace, ash spilled onto the floor, forming letters. Not random shapes, not dust stirred by the wind. Words. You read the first line. I staggered back, nearly tripping over a chair. My breath caught in my throat, my flashlight trembling. The ash shifted again, and new words appeared, scrawled by an invisible hand. The house remembers. A sound rose behind me, soft, like a child humming. I turned, but the room was empty. The melody drifted upstairs, luring me back toward the attic. Each step creaked under my weight, but the song never faltered. At the attic door, I froze. The humming stopped, replaced by a voice whispering through the cracks. "Come closer." I pushed the door open. The attic looked unchanged. Dust, cobwebs, the smell of rot. But on the floor, where the box had been, there was now a blackened circle, scorched deep into the wood. I set the box down in the center of it, my hands shaking. The letter inside pulsed once, twice, like a heartbeat, then silence. The air grew colder, thick with memory, and suddenly I wasn't standing in an empty attic anymore. I saw them. For a moment, just a flicker, but clear enough. The family from the photograph, seated around a table, their faces blurred, charred, mouths open in silent screams. Then, just as quickly, they were gone. I was alone again, alone except for the letter. The box rattled once, violently, and I understood something I hadn't before. This house wasn't haunted by the dead. It was haunted by the letter. Episode 7, The Whispering Names. That night, I stayed in the house. I don't know if it was courage or madness, but I needed answers. The box sat in the attic, the fractured seal gleaming faintly, almost alive in the dark. I lay on the dusty floorboards, staring at it, waiting. At first there was only silence, thick and suffocating. Then just past midnight it began. A whisper, faint but clear enough to distinguish syllables. A name, not mine. Margaret. The sound curled through the air like smoke. The moment it reached my ears, the temperature in the room dropped. I saw my breath cloud in front of me. The name lingered, repeating, then fading as though the house itself was memorizing it. Moments later, another whisper followed. Thomas? This one was deeper, almost guttural, a voice that did not belong to the first. Then another name, and another. Each one spoken by a different voice, old, young, male, female, layering until the attic throbbed with a chorus of whispers. Margaret, Thomas, Elizabeth, Daniel. 4 names. The family from the photograph, the family from the article. My chest tightened. I scrambled through the box for the photo again, my flashlight shaking as I held it up. The faces looked worse now. The father's mouth stretched unnaturally wide, as if screaming. The mother's eyes were dark pools. The children, God, the children looked as though they'd been burned away entirely, smudges of ash where their smiles had been. I dropped the picture, heart pounding. The voices grew louder. They weren't random names anymore. They were calling me, one by one. At first just my name, soft and almost kind, but then others. Names I recognized. My mother's, my brother's, friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Each whispered with eerie intimacy, as though the letter was leafing through the pages of my life. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the voices weren't coming from the air. They were inside me, vibrating in my bones. Closer, they breathed in unison. Read more. I lunged for the box, desperate to end it, to shove the letter back into whatever darkness it belonged to. But the moment I touched it, the seal split further with a sharp crack. The attic door slammed shut behind me. The whispers ceased. And in the silence that followed, one voice remained. Not many, just one. Low, steady, deliberate. It spoke my name, slowly, precisely. And then it said a date. Tomorrow's. Episode 8. The Blood Signature. I didn't sleep after hearing my name paired with tomorrow's date. It echoed in me like a death sentence already signed. By dawn, I was still in the attic, the box before me. The seal had cracked wide enough now that the envelope breathed. Yes, breathed, its corners lifting and falling like a chest drawing shallow air. I told myself I wouldn't look again. But fear has a cruel way of bending into obsession. My eyes kept returning to it, waiting, as if the letter were a stage and I its only audience. At noon it began to change. The crimson wax shimmered as though wet again, and then it spread, slowly, thickly, seeping down the paper's edge. It wasn't wax anymore. The smell hit first, copper, raw and unmistakable. Blood. I staggered back, but I couldn't look away. The blood trickled across the envelope in deliberate strokes, curling, shaping, drawing letters that burned red against the parchment. A name. The signature wasn't mine. It wasn't the family's. It was his. Father Elias Corbin. The priest who, according to every record I had dug up, vanished in 1925, the very year the family burned. My stomach turned cold. I pressed a hand over my mouth, but bile rose anyway. The voices returned, not in whispers this time, but in low, humming chants. The attic vibrated with them. My flashlight flickered. Shadows slid across the walls, wrong in their movement, like reflections of people who weren't there. I picked up the envelope, shaking. "What do you want?" My voice cracked, desperate. The chanting stopped. In the silence, the blood shimmered, fresh and dark, glistening in the name scrawled across the letter. And then, with a sickening certainty, I knew this wasn't a signature. It was a contract. The priest hadn't disappeared. He had bound himself into the letter. His name was the lock, and I had already broken it. I tried to drop the envelope, but my fingers wouldn't obey. The paper clung to me, as though veins beneath the parchment had reached into my skin. My pulse raced. I yanked, clawed at it, but it pulsed with every beat of my heart, sinking with me. And then came the final horror. The blood didn't stop at the priest's name. It bled further, curling again, shaping new letters beneath. My name, written in the same crimson stroke. The house groaned around me, the air thick with the stench of iron. I stumbled backwards, screaming, as the signature glistened under the dying light. Not just his name, mine too. Episode 9, The Mirror That Lied. I fled the attic with the letter pressed against my chest like a parasite I couldn't peel away. No matter how tightly I clutched it, I felt it clinging back, veins of heat crawling into my skin. I stumbled down the hallway, desperate for escape, when my flashlight beam caught something that hadn't been there before. A mirror. It leaned crookedly against the wall, tall and cracked with age, its frame gnawed by time. I knew this house. I had walked these halls twice already. There had been no mirror, yet now it stood waiting, reflecting me in the dim, fractured glass. I froze. My reflection stared back, but it wasn't right. In the glass, the envelope in my hands was already open. My throat tightened. Slowly, I lowered my eyes to the letter I held. It was sealed, wax cracked, but still intact. When I looked back up, my reflection had drawn the pages apart, revealing black ink that moved like liquid shadow. "No," I whispered. "That's not real." But the reflection smiled. Not me, not my smile. Its lips stretched wider than mine could, splitting at the corners until the grin was a wound across its face. And in that grin, I saw the priest's name bleed again, only this time beneath it, another line unfurled. "Read and you are mine." I staggered back, but the mirror's surface rippled like water disturbed by stone. My reflection leaned closer, pressing its hand against the glass. I watched in horror as its fingers smeared blood across the inside of the mirror, blood that dripped outward, staining the hallway floor at my feet. I screamed and hurled the flashlight. The glass shattered, shards scattering across the wooden boards. Darkness swallowed the hallway, but the sound didn't die. In every shard, my reflection still moved. Tiny fragments of me, no, of him, pulling the letter wide open, ink spilling out like smoke. Their mouths whispered in unison. A chorus of voices too many to belong to one man, too many to belong to me. I backed away, stumbling over the debris. The envelope pulsed harder in my hand, each beat thudding with mine, until I couldn't tell where my body ended and the letter began. Then, one shard near my shoe flickered. My reflection leaned close and whispered a single phrase, so soft it curled directly into my bones. "You've already read more than you think." I dropped the letter and bolted down the stairs, every instinct screaming to leave the house, to burn it to the ground, to sever myself from this nightmare. But deep down, beneath the fear, I already knew the truth. No matter how far I ran, the letter wasn't trapped in the house. It was trapped in me. Episode 10, the second line revealed. I left the house before dawn, but the letter came with me. It always did. No matter where I tried to leave it, on the attic floor, on the broken stair, even outside on the wet grass, it found its way back into my coat pocket, warm against my ribs. By the time I staggered back to my apartment, I was shaking. I dropped the box onto the desk and stared at it until my eyes burned. I told myself I wouldn't touch it again. But just before midnight, the envelope shifted, the fractured wax splitting wider. Something new appeared. Another line of ink, bleeding upward from within, surfacing through the paper as though it had been waiting beneath the skin of the letter all along. I leaned closer, heart hammering, and the words revealed themselves in jagged strokes. "Do not read further, or their voices will find you." The room went cold. My breath fogged in front of me, though no window was open. I backed away, but the air moved with me, heavy, electric. And then I heard it, the first voice, a woman's, low, mournful, whispering from the corner of the room. Then a man's voice joined her, then a child's, then dozens more, overlapping, circling me like predators hidden in the dark. The warning hadn't been to keep me safe, it had been to keep them in. The lamp flickered, my reflection in the window shuddered, out of sync, its lips moving even though mine were clenched tight. I couldn't hear what it said, not until all the voices fell silent at once. Then I heard it clearly through the glass. Closer. I stumbled back, crashing against the desk. The letter pulsed violently, the seal hanging by a thread. My name was still scrawled beneath the priest's, dark and wet, as though it had been freshly written. I grabbed the letter, desperate to end it. I tried to burn it with a match, but the flame snuffed out the instant it touched the paper, leaving only the smell of singed flesh. My flesh, blistering on my fingertips. Screaming, I dropped it. The envelope landed on the floor, but when it did, every voice in the room spoke at once. Not names, not prayers. Laughter. Mocking, endless laughter, filling every shadow, every crack in the walls, until I thought my skull would split. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the laughter pressed on, vibrating through the floorboards, through my bones, until suddenly, silence. The letter lay open a fraction wider. The warning still glistened on the page, but beneath it, faint, hidden in the bleeding ink, I thought I saw the beginning of a third line. And I knew this was only the beginning. Episode 11, The Midnight Visitor. It began with the sound of footsteps. At first I thought it was a dream, shuffling, steady steps pacing outside my apartment door. But when I opened my eyes, the clock glared back at me, 3:00 a.m., the hour when silence should reign. Instead, the floorboards outside creaked in a rhythm too deliberate to be the wind, too heavy to be my imagination. I froze in bed, listening. Step, pause, step, pause. Whoever it was, they weren't trying to sneak. They wanted me to know they were there. My gaze slid to the desk. The letter rested in the box, still faintly glowing with that unnatural pulse. I held my breath as the footsteps stopped directly outside my door. Knock. Just once. Slow. Hollow. The kind of knock that isn't asking permission to enter. It's announcing arrival. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The silence stretched so long I thought maybe it was over, until the knob rattled. Not fast, not violent, just testing. "Who's there?" My voice barely scraped out, raw with fear. The answer came not from the hall, but from inside the room. A whisper curling against my ear. "Closer." My stomach turned. I leapt from the bed, heart hammering, and grabbed the lamp. The light flared across the walls, but the room wasn't empty anymore. In the corner by the desk, a figure stood. Tall, shrouded in black. No face, just a void where features should be. Yet I felt its eyes fixed on me, heavy and suffocating. My lamp flickered as it moved one step forward, then stopped. The box rattled on the desk. The letter shifted inside it, the fractured seal widening like a grin. The figure raised its hand. Long skeletal fingers curled, and the lid of the box flew open with a crash. The letter rose into the air, trembling as though caught between me and the thing that had come for it. "No!" I shouted, lunging forward. I snatched the letter midair. The moment my fingers closed around it, the room plunged into darkness. The lamp shattered. The only light left was the faint, sickly glow bleeding from the letter's ink. In that glow, the figure towered closer. Its faceless void stretched and warped until I heard it breathe. A deep, rattling inhale that shook the walls. I stumbled backward, clutching the letter to my chest. "What do you want?" The answer came not as words, but as a chorus of voices, layered and broken, spilling from the void where its mouth should have been. "Read." The figure stepped closer. Its hand reached out, skeletal and inevitable, not for me, but for the seal. I screamed, slamming the letter shut, pressing my bloodied palm over the crack. For a heartbeat, everything went still. Then the clock struck 3:17. The visitor vanished, but the letter was no longer sealed. Episode 12. The third line revealed. Morning light did nothing to soften the terror. My apartment looked the same, walls intact, furniture unmoved, but the air was wrong, heavier, denser, as if last night's visitor had not left, only hidden. On the desk lay the letter, its seal finally broken. The crack across the wax had split fully, jagged and raw, like a wound torn open. For the first time I could see beyond the warning lines. 2 sentences glared back at me, their ink still bleeding, alive. To the one who finds this, you are already cursed. Do not read further, or their voices will find you. But beneath them now, a 3rd line surfaced, slowly, painfully, like blood rising through gauze. If you burn this, you burn with us. The words shimmered. The paper seemed to pulse with heat, though when I touched it, it was ice cold. My stomach churned. I staggered back, clutching my head. I remembered the match the night before, the way the flame had died instantly, leaving the stench of scorched flesh on my fingers. It hadn't been an accident. The letter hadn't allowed it. The 3rd line was proof. This thing wasn't meant to be destroyed. It was meant to trap. As I stared, the ink writhed again. The words blurred, twisting into shapes I almost recognized. Faces, screaming faces etched into the parchment. Their mouths open, their eyes hollow. The family, the children, their charred visages bleeding through the paper, begging silently. And then one face shifted. It wasn't the family anymore. It was mine. The voices returned all at once, surging from the letter like a storm breaking through. Not whispers, not laughter, but raw screams, anguished and furious. The room vibrated with them, the walls quaking, plaster splitting in thin cracks. My lamp exploded, showering sparks. I clutched the letter to my chest, my ears ringing, and in the chaos, one voice rose above the rest, deep, steady, the same that had whispered my name before. The seal is broken. The contract holds. No, I rasped, shaking my head, trembling. I didn't sign anything. I didn't. But my words were drowned out as the paper glowed, the ink expanding, spreading across the page like veins. I tried to drop it, but my fingers locked, fused against the parchment. It throbbed with my pulse, feeding on it. In the reflection of the cracked window, I saw myself clutching the letter. But the reflection was grinning, wide and unhuman. My mouth wasn't moving, but his was, and he was whispering the 4th line already. I collapsed to my knees, the letter searing cold into my palms. And in that moment I understood. The warnings weren't meant to save me. They were meant to remind me there was no way out. The letter had chosen me, and it wasn't finished. Episode 13, The Forgotten Confession. The letter no longer looked like paper. It felt heavier, darker, as if it had been carved from bone. My hands trembled as I held it. But no matter how I tried, I couldn't let go. The ink crawled across the page, forming new words with each pulse of my heartbeat. And then I saw what it truly was. Not a warning, not a curse. A confession. The words bled into lines, shaky and uneven, but they carried weight, drenched in dread. It began with the priest's name, the same one that had written itself in blood days ago. Father Elias Corbin. Forgive me, for I have sinned. I write not to God, but to the one who will carry my burden when I no longer can. I killed them, the family. I burned them to cleanse what could not be forgiven. My stomach twisted, the room swayed, the voices hushed as though they too leaned closer to hear. The ink darkened and the confession grew worse. The children were first, innocence tainted by bloodlines cursed. Then the mother, for shielding them. Then the father, for refusing to speak. I locked the doors. I struck the match. I watched the fire eat their screams. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat, but the letter clung tighter to my skin. The words burned into me, branding themselves into memory. The priest's voice, his voice, seeped through the page, overlapping the ink. A guttural whisper, raw with guilt, and something far darker, satisfaction. But still they remain. They do not leave me. Their eyes burn in the smoke. Their voices haunt the silence. I write this not as absolution, but as surrender. Whoever holds this letter, you will carry them too. Their whispers will find you. Their hunger will bind you. Their curse will not die with me. My knees buckled. I dropped to the floor, but the letter remained glued to my palm, bleeding heat into my veins. The shadows in the room shifted, twisting into shapes. 4 of them. The family. They stood at the edges of the lamplight, faces half burned, half ash, eyes hollow yet fixed on me. The children moved first, their small mouths opening, not in screams but in soft, mournful words. Why didn't you save us?" I shook my head violently, tears burning my eyes. "I wasn't there. I wasn't." But the father's voice cut me, low and jagged. "You are now." The priest's confession ended in a final line, scrawled so violently it nearly tore through the paper. "I pass this curse to you. May your soul burn where mine could not." The ink spread across the page, bleeding into my skin, and for a heartbeat I felt the fire, their fire, swallowing me whole. And then I heard them all at once. Not the priest, not the whispers, the family, screaming. And I knew the confession wasn't forgotten. It had only been waiting for me to read it. Episode 14, the final line revealed. The letter writhed in my grip like a living thing. My hands burned where it clung to my skin, as though veins from the parchment had fused with my flesh. The priest's confession still echoed in my mind, his words dripping like ash through my thoughts. But the ink didn't stop with him. A new line began to form. The paper quivered. The ink bled, first in dots, then in strokes, curling into letters that carved themselves into existence. My eyes followed helplessly as the words emerged, darker, deeper than all that came before. When the last line is read, the circle will open, and what was bound will walk again. My breath caught. I wanted to look away, but the words seared into me, burning behind my eyelids even when I squeezed them shut. The walls trembled. The air thickened with the smell of smoke and charred flesh. From the corners of the room, shadows stretched, converging toward me. The family's figures returned, burned, broken, whispering, but this time they didn't weep. They smiled. I stumbled backward, clutching the letter. No, this isn't mine. I didn't write this." My voice cracked against the weight of silence. But the shadows didn't stop. The floorboards split beneath me, thin cracks radiating outward, glowing with a faint crimson light. I realized then, it wasn't the house shaking. It wasn't the letter trembling. It was something beneath us, something waiting. The letter pulsed one last time, harder than before, and then the final line burned into existence. The words glowed red, wet as blood, written in a hand that wasn't mine and yet somehow was. "And when you speak these words aloud, you will complete what he began." The paper grew hot, scorching. Smoke curled from its edges, but it didn't burn. Instead, the words pulsed brighter, demanding breath, demanding voice. "No," I whispered, shaking, tears sliding down my cheeks. I won't say it." But in the reflection of the cracked window, my mouth moved without me. My reflection was already speaking, lips forming the shapes of the words I refused to utter. The air split open with a sound like tearing flesh. The ground rumbled, and from the glowing cracks rose a hand, charred, skeletal, dripping with ash. Another followed. A figure began to climb free, dragging itself upward, fueled by the letter's promise. The priest, Father Elias Corbin. His hollow eyes locked onto me, his grin wide, splitting his face in two. The shadows of the family circled him, their whispers no longer mournful but triumphant, chanting as one. "The circle opens, the circle opens, the circle opens." And the letter in my hand, no longer a warning, no longer a confession, blazed with a single truth. It had never been a curse. It had always been a ritual. Episode 15, the letter that opens itself. The cracks in the floor widened as Father Elias dragged himself upward, his charred hands clawing into the wood like roots breaking through soil. Ash swirled around him, and the shadows of the family pressed close, their hollow smiles fixed on me. I clutched the letter tight, praying it would burn itself out, dissolve, do something, but instead it grew heavier, as if the weight of every soul it had bound pressed into my palms. Then the letter moved. The parchment quivered, folding and unfolding on its own, like wings beating. The wax, long broken, peeled away in brittle flakes, and the pages spread open without my touch. For the first time, I saw it in full. It wasn't a letter. It was a book written in blood, though it had only ever disguised itself as one page. Symbols writhed in the margins. Letters rearranged themselves as I watched. The confession bled seamlessly into the ritual, and the ritual bled into a command. Complete the circle. Speak the name. My body shook with resistance, but my lips tingled, numb, as if someone else were guiding them. In the window's fractured glass, my reflection leaned forward eagerly, whispering words I didn't understand, words I was about to say. Father Elias rose higher, his face now fully visible, burned, hollow, yet grinning as though victory was already his. His voice rumbled through the room, layered with centuries of rot. "Read it. Finish what I began. You are mine." "No!" I screamed, forcing my lips shut, choking back the words. My throat burned, my chest tight, but the letter pulsed with rage, its edges cutting into my skin. Blood spilled onto the parchment, and the paper drank it eagerly, glowing brighter. The family's shadows closed in, the children's whispers crawled up my spine. "Say it. Free us. Say it." Tears blurred my vision. My voice broke. "You're not trapped. You're bound to him." For one brief instant, the shadows wavered. The smiles faltered. The priest's hollow eyes narrowed. I seized it. With the last shred of my strength, I tore the letter in half. The sound was not paper ripping, it was flesh. The scream that erupted shook the walls, rattled the glass, shattered the air itself. Elias roared, his body collapsing into smoke and ash, clawing toward me as if to drag me down with him. The family's shadows shrieked, stretching, twisting, until they were ripped apart, scattering into nothingness. And then, silence. The letter's halves smoldered in my hands. Black ash crumbled between my fingers, drifting to the floor. The cracks in the boards sealed. The air grew still. It was over. At least that's what I wanted to believe. Because as I stumbled toward the door, gasping for air, I saw it, just for a heartbeat, etched into the wall where the letter had burned away. My name. And beneath it, scrawled in blood, "To the one who finds this next."
Epilogue, the unopened letter from 100 years ago. They say nightmares end when you wake up. But what if the nightmare wakes with you? I moved out of that apartment the next day, packed what little I owned into a car and left the city behind, telling myself distance could smother whatever lingered in my veins. For a while, it almost worked. The air felt lighter. The nights were quiet. The silence didn't whisper my name. Until last week, I was at a library in a small town, sifting through old shelves for distraction. That's when I saw it. Not the letter, not the box, but a book left open on a table. Its pages yellowed, untouched for decades. At the top of the page was a line written in ink so dark it looked wet. "To the one who finds this, you are already cursed." My chest tightened. I slammed the book shut, heart pounding. But as I did, something slipped free from its pages, an envelope. Old, sealed with crimson wax. The same seal. The same symbol. I froze, my blood running cold. I hadn't brought it with me. I had destroyed it. I had watched it turn to ash. Yet there it was, waiting. The librarian walked past just then. She noticed the envelope on the table and frowned. "Oh," she said casually, reaching down to pick it up. "Someone must have left this here." I tried to stop her. I swear I did. But my body wouldn't move. My voice caught in my throat. I could only watch as her fingers brushed the wax. And when she touched it, the air shifted. The lights above flickered. And faintly, so faintly only I seemed to hear it, came a whisper curling through the silence. "Closer. The letter doesn't belong to me anymore. But I know where it will go next. And I know it will never stop opening itself."